I would love to see minimum wage. I don't know if it's going to be $15. I would love to see it, but now $15 ain't enough. But I think $15 is a nice start.
Yeah.
I know it may not happen in this administration, but like it makes no sense that a minimum wage is $8.25.
And now you do $8.
And I ain't talking about, and unfortunately, more people other than high school students and stuff like that are making, you know what I'm saying, are relegated to jobs that are $8.25. I even think we need to change the system with our waiters and waitresses. Not that I don't mind tipping, but it makes no sense that they have to survive off of, because here's the thing. Some people just ain't gonna ever be good tippers. We can talk, we can shame them. Yeah. We can have podcasts, TED Talks, all kind of stuff about 18%, 20%. It's gonna be some folk who gonna get $5.
Yeah.
Regardless. They could have spent $300. They gonna tip you $5. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that. But most times tips are based on, people say you should tip based on the amount, but like, the argument, if I was in a debate class, my argument against that would be whether I went to Red Lobster or Ruth Chris, I ordered the same amount of food. It ain't my fault that it's cheaper. You know what I'm saying? Like people, because I see why people would say that. Like, I'm paying for your service. Like, yeah, I mean, this got me $50 over here, and maybe $300 over there. It was you gave me the same service, right? On the flip side of that, I think my reason for tipping is just because I understand how much they make. And I don't mind giving a certain percentage of my bill to that. Because I do agree that my service, what you did for me, bringing out my plate, refilling my drinks, none of that. And I've had sometimes better service at a cheap restaurant than I had at a great restaurant, right? But unfortunately, the scales are different. However, despite my personal feelings, anybody else's personal feelings, and let me just mind you before any people get this confused, I tip well. I always tip 18%, regardless of the price. Unless you were terrible to me, then you may get like a 10% or something. But otherwise, you're going to get 18%. But I feel that it is unjust for waiters and waitresses to live solely off tips. I feel like tips to waiters and waitresses should be the same way we decide to tip our barbers, our beauticians, any other service people who set a very standard rate that covers their cost of living. And the tip is more of an appreciation than it is a supplement to their income. Right. So I would love to be able to go to a restaurant and I know that they're making, let's say, a minimum $13 to $15 an hour, right? Which still ain't a lot of money, but it's a quote unquote livable wage. Yeah. And I give them $10 because I really appreciated them. Yeah. Not because the meal was 18% of my bill, right? Or whatever it is. So I say that to say, I think livable wages should be a part of that. I think continued access to affordable health care should be things that, drive us to the polls. I think women's rights and women's health issues should drive us to the polls, because when we talk about women's health issues, I don't think people understand that like the mortality rate among like pregnant women and children and stuff like that, all that's wrapped up in that one conversation. They're very different conversations, but they're wrapped up in that one kind of holistic conversation. I think how we deal with inflation from a macro level should bring us to the polls. Right. And these are things that Kamala has suggested policies around. In addition to that, I am very indifferent among like the border and immigration. We are a country of immigrants. Yeah. Our quote unquote founding fathers were not citizens of the United States. This land was stolen. So it's almost oxymoronic to me of how like protective we are of like people coming in. Like, what? They're taking our jobs. You're disqualified. They're not taking your job. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate to sound stereotypical, but like, if our brothers and sisters from Mexico have construction skills, let them build that house. You don't have that skill. What job are they taking? They ain't taking my job. I don't know how to build no house. Right?
Hey, you work for Habitat for Humanity. Y'all build houses.
But that ain't my skill set. I'm in the ivory tower, as they would say, right? And again, I don't want to sound stereotypical, but my point is that like, when people come over with certain skill sets and things like, and again, I think if you're coming into a country, there should be a process. But I'm not bothered by people coming in because all of my ancestors were dropped off. Yeah. Y'all ancestors came and stole it. Ain't none of us native here except the indigenous people, right? That's their land. And we stole it from them. So like, how are we so hard pressed about people coming into the land and wanting to seek asylum or wanting this quote unquote American dream, whatever the heck that means, right? So I'm kind of indifferent on that, but I do think there needs to be a process. But I'm like indifferent on whatever this border control like this harsh, like, no, stop them at the border, all this kind of stuff. Like, nah, don't be jumping the border, but like, you know what I'm saying? But let them through if they go through the process, right?
Yeah.
Because the separation of children and families and stuff like that is asinine. So those are some things I top of my head.
Yeah.
What about for you? What policies do you think should be driving our community?
I feel like you mentioned most of them. I think definitely the economy in terms of the student loan forgiveness is important. As a person who's had student loans before, my wife who has a student loan, who's an educator, I feel like a lot of people I know, Black millennials, have student loans. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that's a big weight that's on a lot of folks' shoulders, where I feel like we would be able to do more things without student loans.
Mm-hmm.
To the immigration thing, like I think something which is interesting. So people will like be like, "Oh, I don't like this, I don't like that." In my mind, I'd be thinking like, "How does it affect my life?" You know what I'm saying? Like immigration, it personally, with what I do, it would actually make my life easier. I would make way more money if we had more immigration. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like in terms of like, I sell life insurance. So if some of these people had better access to a quicker route to citizenship, right? If these a lot of people who are already in the U.S. who have Social Security cards or green cards and visas and stuff like that, and make that citizenship process easier, I will make way more money, right? You know what I'm saying? So I feel like certain things that are issues that I feel like a lot of folks who are just talking points really have no effect on you. You don't live near no border. You don't have any issues and stuff like that. Like you live in New York, talking about, yeah, man, that border. Like, nigga, like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? Like, what border? You know what I'm saying? What are you talking about? But I think like most of it just TikTok talking points. But I feel like those are big ones. The biggest one to me is just really like freeing up this money. Student loan forgiveness, I feel like would change the landscape and give a lot of folks. Because to me, it's another thing too. Is like we're seeing the growth in the country. We're seeing houses being built at crazy prices. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like thinking like, where are these people coming from? How are people affording these things? And they have these student loans. And imagine all the houses that could be purchased if we can free up some of that. Because
people ain't paying their student loans, Brian.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
They're putting them in deferment, or they're paying it up until they get approved and closed, and then letting them things go back into like, you know, like
but
they're doing what they got to do to get a house, and then they, you know what I'm saying.
But it's affecting like credit scores, which is another thing that
which is racist.
Which is racist, but also it affects your interest rate in your home. You know what I'm saying?